Welcome to my channel. Before this story begins, I want you to do one thing. Forget everything you think you know about success, failure, and the limits of your own life. Because during the next few minutes, you are about to discover a truth that most people realize only when it is too late. Somewhere in this story is a lesson powerful enough to change the way you think forever, but only those who stay until the end will truly understand it. Imagine standing in front of two doors. Behind the first door is the life you are living today, filled with familiar routines, unfinished dreams, and the same excuses that have quietly stolen years from your future. Behind the second door is the life you have always imagined, a life of confidence, purpose, courage, and success. There is only one difference between those two doors, and it is not talent, money, education, or luck. It is one decision. The question is, will you have the courage to make it? Listen carefully, because the answer might completely transform your future. In a peaceful valley surrounded by endless mountains lived a young man named Adrian. Every morning he watched the sunrise from the wooden bridge crossing the river outside his village. As the golden light spread across the water, he dreamed of living a life that truly mattered. Yet every evening he returned home carrying the same disappointment. He worked hard, respected everyone, and believed he was doing everything right, but nothing seemed to change. Opportunities always appeared to belong to someone else. Success always looked close enough to see, but impossible to reach. Gradually, Adrian stopped chasing his dreams because disappointment hurt less than hope. Whenever an opportunity appeared, fear reminded him of every mistake he had ever made. Whenever someone encouraged him to dream bigger, doubt whispered that ordinary people were never meant for extraordinary lives. One rainy evening, after another day that felt exactly like the hundreds before it, Adrian climbed a lonely mountain overlooking the valley. The clouds covered the stars, and the cold wind seemed to carry every unanswered question in his heart. Standing at the edge of the cliff, he asked himself something he had never dared to ask before. If I continue making the same choices, will my future ever become different? The silence answered more honestly than words could. For the first time, he understood that waiting for life to change without changing himself was the greatest mistake he had ever made. Before leaving the mountain, he made a promise that nobody else heard. From that day forward, he would stop searching for excuses and start searching for growth. The next morning, while the village was still asleep, Adrian woke before sunrise. His body wanted comfort, but his future demanded discipline. He exercised until his muscles burned, read inspiring books while others were still dreaming, wrote his goals on paper every single day, and learned one new skill every evening before sleeping. The progress seemed invisible. Days passed without dramatic results. Weeks passed without recognition. Some friends laughed at his routine, telling him he was wasting his energy because life never changes for people like them. Their words hurt, but Adrian had finally learned something important. Every opinion from someone who had already surrendered was another reason to continue fighting. Slowly, something remarkable began happening inside him. His confidence stopped depending on praise. His motivation stopped depending on feelings. He realized that discipline continues working long after motivation disappears. Every promise he kept to himself strengthened his character. Every difficult morning made him mentally stronger. Every challenge became another opportunity to prove that he was capable of far more than he had once believed. Then, just as everything seemed to be improving, life tested him harder than ever before. An opportunity he had spent years preparing for disappeared overnight because of circumstances completely beyond his control. Friends advised him to accept defeat and return to an ordinary life. For a few painful moments, the old voice of fear returned, reminding him of every failure from his past. Adrian closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered the promise he had made on the mountain. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" he asked, "What is this challenge preparing me to become?" That single question changed everything. He smiled, stood up, and walked forward with greater determination than ever before, completely unaware that the greatest chapter of his life had only just begun and that every challenge waiting ahead would reveal a strength he had never imagined existed within him. The next morning, Adrian stood once again on the wooden bridge where he had spent so many years watching the sunrise without believing his own life could change. This time, however, the rising sun looked different. The sky had not changed. The river still flowed with the same quiet rhythm, and the mountains remained as tall as ever. Yet, something inside him had awakened. For the first time, he realized that hope is not something the world gives you. Hope is something you choose to protect, even when everything around you tells you to surrender. Although the opportunity he had worked toward was gone, his determination had become stronger than his disappointment. Instead of asking life for easier circumstances, he began asking himself tougher questions. How can I become stronger? What skill can I learn today? Which weakness can I turn into a strength? Those questions slowly replaced the endless excuses that had controlled his thoughts for years. Every sunrise became a reminder that another chance had arrived. Every sunset became proof that he had survived another day without giving up. His routine grew stronger with every passing week. He exercised before dawn, studied while others rested, learned from every mistake, and refused to compare his journey with anyone else's. He finally understood that comparison is the fastest way to destroy confidence because everyone begins from a different place and walks a different road. One afternoon, while traveling through the nearby forest, Adrian noticed an elderly carpenter carefully carving a magnificent eagle from an ordinary piece of wood. Fascinated by the incredible detail, Adrian asked, "How can you create something so beautiful from something so plain?" The old carpenter smiled without looking up and replied, "The eagle has always been inside the wood. I simply remove everything that doesn't belong." Those words echoed through Adrian's heart long after he continued his journey. Suddenly, he understood that greatness already existed inside every person. Fear, laziness, self-doubt, anger, and excuses were simply the unnecessary pieces hiding their true potential. Success was not about becoming someone completely different. It was about removing everything that prevented your true character from shining. Inspired by that lesson, Adrian became even more disciplined. Whenever fear appeared, he replaced it with action. Whenever doubt entered his mind, he reminded himself of every obstacle he had already overcome. Whenever comfort tempted him to stop growing, he remembered the painful future he had imagined on the mountain months earlier. Little by little, his confidence became impossible to shake because it was no longer built on temporary success. It was built on daily discipline. As the seasons changed, people around the village noticed something remarkable. Adrian no longer walked with hesitation. His words carried calm confidence, his actions reflected purpose, and his attitude inspired everyone who met him. Many believed luck had finally found him, but they had not witnessed the thousands of invisible decisions that had shaped the person standing before them. They saw the results without seeing the sacrifices. They admired the confidence without understanding the years of self-discipline hidden behind it. One evening, an unexpected challenge arrived. A trusted friend betrayed Adrian's confidence for personal gain, spreading lies that damaged his reputation throughout the village. The pain cut deeper than any previous failure because it came from someone he had loved like a brother. For several days, anger filled his heart. He imagined proving everyone wrong and exposing the truth. But as he sat quietly beside the river one evening, he remembered another lesson life had already taught him. Holding on to bitterness would not punish the person who had betrayed him. It would only imprison his own peace. Slowly, he chose forgiveness. Not because betrayal was acceptable, but because he refused to allow another person's actions to control the direction of his future. That decision became one of the greatest victories of his entire journey. He discovered that mastering your emotions requires more courage than defeating any opponent. As another sunrise painted the valley with brilliant shades of gold, Adrian climbed the mountain once more. Standing where fear had once controlled every thought, he smiled with quiet confidence. The road ahead remained uncertain. Greater challenges were still waiting. Bigger dreams still seemed far away. Yet, none of those things frightened him anymore because he had discovered a truth that few people ever understand. A person who continues growing during failure becomes unstoppable during success. Every difficult season had prepared him for responsibilities he could not have carried before. Every disappointment had quietly strengthened his character. Looking toward the endless horizon, Adrian took another determined step forward, knowing that the greatest victories of his life would never come from defeating the world around him, but from continuing to conquer the doubts that once lived within his own heart. As the months passed, Adrian discovered that the greatest reward for perseverance was not success itself, but the person he was becoming along the way. Every challenge had shaped his character, every disappointment had strengthened his patience, and every difficult decision had taught him the value of courage. He no longer woke up each morning wondering whether life would be fair. Instead, he woke up asking how he could become stronger than whatever the day placed in front of him. That single change in mindset transformed every obstacle into an opportunity. The mountains that had once intimidated him now reminded him that every great achievement begins with a single step. One morning, while traveling through a distant valley, Adrian met an elderly traveler resting beneath a giant oak tree. The old man carried only a small backpack, yet his face reflected a peace that many wealthy people never experience. Curious, Adrian asked him what had brought him such happiness. The traveler smiled warmly and replied, "Most people spend their lives searching for the perfect destination, but they forget to enjoy the person they are becoming during the journey." Those words remained in Adrian's mind long after they parted ways. He realized that he had spent years believing happiness existed somewhere in the future. Now he understood that every lesson, every act of discipline, every moment of gratitude, and every challenge overcome had already filled his life with purpose. From that day forward, he stopped measuring success by trophies or recognition. Instead, he measured it by the strength of his character and the positive difference he could make in the lives of others. As time passed, Adrian began helping young people in his village who struggled with fear and self-doubt just as he once had. Every weekend, he gathered them beneath the old oak tree near the river and shared the lessons life had taught him. He encouraged them to believe in themselves before expecting the world to believe in them. He reminded them that confidence is earned by keeping promises to yourself, not by waiting for someone else's approval. At first, only a handful of people attended, but week after week, the group grew larger. Some came after failing exams. Others had lost jobs, faced rejection, or simply believed they were not good enough. Adrian listened carefully to every story before sharing a simple truth. Your current situation is only one chapter of your life. Never mistake one difficult chapter for the entire book. Those words gave many people the courage to begin again. One evening, a young woman approached Adrian with tears in her eyes. She explained that she had abandoned her dream years earlier because everyone around her insisted she would never succeed. Adrian smiled gently and asked, "Whose voice have you been listening to all these years?" She remained silent for a moment before quietly answering, "Everyone else's, except my own." Adrian nodded and replied, "The moment you choose your own belief over someone else's doubt, your future begins to change." Inspired by his words, she promised herself that night she would start again, regardless of how long the journey might take. Watching her walk away with renewed confidence reminded Adrian why his own struggles had been necessary. His greatest purpose was not simply to build a successful life for himself, but to help others discover the courage already hidden inside them. As another year passed, Adrian received an invitation to speak before hundreds of people from neighboring villages. Standing on the stage, he looked across the crowd and saw faces filled with hope, uncertainty, fear, and determination. He began with a question instead of a speech. "How many dreams have you buried because fear convinced you that you were not enough?" The room became completely silent. He continued, "Fear will always speak first. It will remind you of every failure, every mistake, and every reason to stop. But courage speaks quietly. It simply asks you to take one more step. Every extraordinary life is built by ordinary people who refuse to let fear write the ending of their story." The audience erupted into applause, not because Adrian had promised them an easy life, but because he had reminded them that they were stronger than they believed. That evening, as he climbed the familiar mountain overlooking the valley, he watched the sun disappear beyond the horizon and smiled with deep gratitude. He understood that more challenges would certainly come. There would still be disappointments, unexpected losses, and moments of uncertainty. Yet, none of those possibilities frightened him anymore. He had learned the greatest lesson of all. A person who continues moving forward with faith, discipline, humility, and purpose can be delayed but never permanently defeated. Looking toward tomorrow with complete confidence, Adrian took another step, knowing that the greatest chapter of his life was still waiting beyond the next sunrise. The final stage of Adrian's journey arrived quietly, without fireworks or applause. One peaceful morning, as the first rays of sunlight stretched across the valley, he climbed the mountain where his transformation had begun years before. Standing at the summit, he looked over the winding river, the small village, and the endless horizon beyond. Everything appeared exactly as it had on the day he first came there, filled with fear and uncertainty. The mountains had not changed, the sky had not changed, the path beneath his feet had not changed. The only thing that had truly changed was the man standing there. Adrian smiled as he remembered the frightened young dreamer who once believed success belonged only to lucky people. He remembered every rejection that had made him question his worth, every failure that had stolen his confidence, and every lonely night when giving up seemed easier than continuing. Looking back, he realized that none of those painful moments had been punishments. They had all been lessons preparing him for the person he was meant to become. If life had always been easy, he would never have learned discipline. If people had never doubted him, he would never have discovered self-belief. If failure had never visited his life, he would never have built the resilience that now guided every decision he made. As he walked back toward the village, he noticed something remarkable. The people around him had changed too. The young students who once feared making mistakes now chased their dreams with confidence. Families who had struggled through difficult seasons now encouraged one another with hope instead of complaints. Friends who had once laughed at ambition now inspired others to pursue their own goals. Adrian realized that courage is contagious. When one person chooses to rise above fear, countless others begin believing they can do the same. He understood that the greatest success is not measured by money, awards, or recognition. It is measured by the number of lives made brighter because you refuse to give up on your own. One afternoon, the elderly carpenter invited Adrian back to his workshop. The magnificent eagle carved from wood now stood proudly at the entrance, admired by everyone who passed. The old man handed Adrian a small, unfinished block of wood and smiled. "What do you see?" he asked. Adrian studied it carefully before answering, "I see endless possibilities." The carpenter nodded with satisfaction and replied, "Exactly. Years ago, you would have seen only a piece of wood. Today, you see what it can become. That is the greatest change of all. The way you see the world depends on the person you have become." Adrian thanked him because he knew those words described not only the wood, but life itself. Every obstacle, every disappointment, and every opportunity depends on the eyes through which we choose to see it. As the years passed, Adrian became known far beyond his village, not because he chased fame, but because he never stopped serving others. He visited schools, spoke to struggling families, encouraged young entrepreneurs, comforted people facing failure, and reminded everyone that every sunrise brings another opportunity to begin again. Whenever someone asked him for the secret to success, he gave the same answer. Success is not one big decision. It is thousands of small decisions made consistently when nobody is watching. He explained that waking up with purpose, protecting your mindset, learning every day, staying humble during victories, remaining patient through difficulties, and helping others without expecting anything in return create a life that no amount of money can replace. His words spread from village to village because they came from experience rather than theory. One evening, while watching the sunset beside the river, Adrian reflected on everything life had taught him. He realized that happiness is not found at the end of the journey. It is found in becoming stronger through every challenge, wiser through every mistake, kinder through every hardship, and more grateful through every blessing. He understood that no person escapes pain, but everyone has the power to decide whether pain becomes a prison or a teacher. Before leaving the river, Adrian looked toward the horizon one final time and made a promise that would guide the rest of his life. He would continue learning, continue growing, and continue reminding people that they are capable of far more than fear wants them to believe. If this story leaves one message in your heart, let it be this. Never allow temporary failure to become a permanent excuse. Never let someone else's opinion become the limit of your potential. Every challenge carries a lesson, every setback hides an opportunity, and every sunrise offers another chance to rewrite your future. Believe in yourself even when nobody else does. Keep moving when progress feels slow. Stay disciplined when motivation disappears. Choose gratitude instead of complaints, courage instead of comfort, and action instead of excuses. One day you will look back and realize that the moments you once called your greatest struggles became the strongest foundations of your greatest victories. Your journey is still unfolding. Your purpose is still waiting to be fully discovered. The next decision you make today may become the turning point that changes your life forever. Walk forward with confidence, protect your dreams with unwavering faith, and remember that extraordinary lives are not created by extraordinary luck. They are created by ordinary people who refuse to surrender, one determined step, one faithful choice, and one courageous sunrise at a time.